This is Actualize Freedom, straight talk on growing clicks and conversions on Amazon FBA from people doing it every day. Now here's your host, digital marketing acrobat, Danny Kenji Carlson.
What's up, guys? Danny Carlson here, and welcome to the Actualize Freedom podcast, a no bullshit podcast about selling online and building your freedom through Amazon FBA. So this one is going to be with my friend Jake Barefoot. He's an expert in general virtual assistants and hiring people overseas, specifically in the Philippines. He is the founder of a company called Trouble-Free Employees that has a big team here in the Philippines of virtual assistants, graphic designers, web developers, and the like. And so he has a ton of experience hiring overseas workers. And you guys are probably wondering, when's the right time to hire your first overseas workers? What are some of the pitfalls and the differences between hiring people overseas and hiring people in the US? What are the cost savings really? And most importantly, I think what we go over here is, what are the real key things to watch out for and how to mitigate against them. So if you're considering building a remote team or hiring your first general virtual assistant, this episode is going to be really valuable to you. So let's welcome to the podcast, motherfucking Jake. So man, welcome to the podcast, Jake.
Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you on here. So just explain to the audience a little bit about how you came to become the expert of Filipino outsourced employees and your experience behind that.
Well, it actually had quite a bit of a backstory to it. I started off doing e-com in 1996. I was real young. I was only 12 years old when I first got started. My dad had a tour and activity company in Hawaii that he'd been running since the mid-70s, and he thought it would be a good idea to get some sort of website together for it, but he had no idea how to actually do that. And I'd been kind of messing with HTML and stuff before, so I put together a site for him, and within about a year we had over $1 million in sales. It was back in the day when it was really easy to do e-com. You could basically put anything out there and people would buy, because there wasn't really much that was out there at the time. Eventually, as continued to grow that company, we had problems with finding enough human resources on Maui, where I'm from, and that made me start to look for different options where I could find people in the call center world that would be able to help us out, which led me to come out to Cebu. Prior to that, we had put together some really in-depth kind of task management software, and when I came out here, there was definitely a huge value that I saw from the human resources that we were able to find here, people that were really eager to work and very highly skilled, paid a lot of attention, really cared, and eventually I started with just one person over here trying to figure out what, if it was a viable idea or not. Quickly I realized that it was an extremely viable idea, scaled up to about 10 people, at which point I came out here and started doing some training one-on-one. And there was an issue that I ran into where I had I was offering commission bonuses to some of the salespeople that I had answering the phone, and I came back for the second sales trip out here, or the second training trip out here, and I had one of my team members come up to me and ask me what happened with the commissions. And at that point in time, I was working with a call center here that was contracted out. It was owned by a man from India who seemed to be a very nice guy, except what I ended up finding out was that he'd been taking the money that was supposed to go towards my team members and not giving them the commissions that they were promised, which I felt was something that I didn't want to do business with him anymore. I had a team that was trained already, and I didn't really want to let them go. I wanted to make sure that sort of situation didn't happen again. So I took that team and started my own company, and that's how Trouble-Free Employees started. And we've been kind of growing steadily ever since, doing lots of bringing on other clients.
Yeah, it's amazing how many businesses stem out of what other people would call business failure, but looking back on it, it's a pivot, right?
Yeah.
It's only a failure if you just quit and go back to working at McDonald's or something like that. Then maybe that would be a failure. But you took that and you started a brand new business from that. So what do your current employees here in Cebu, what kind of roles are they working for you?
We have a lot of different things that we have people do. I mean, basically, people ask me what we can do, and I normally say pretty much anything that can be done on a phone or a computer. We have a web development team that their services are very popular. We have lots of real estate assistants that are helping different realtors across the United States, following up on their leads, help to generate leads, help to manage their sales pipeline. We have some processing teams that are doing really similar sort of tasks to what I initially had, order processing from different websites that I've built, and then some customer service representative sort of tasks, and we really have a lot. There's a lot of different things.
Awesome. And what kind of cost savings? Give me a few examples, maybe 2 examples of roles that, like, what is the difference between an American employee and a Filipino Cebu-based employee for the same role and like the same quality of work?
Well, where I'm from in Hawaii, the cost of living is some of the highest in the nation. So the wages are higher than you're going to find in most places in the United States. So the cost savings is very large when you calculate the two. Where we're kind of set up in our company is we do the upper end virtual assistants. We charge $9.97 an hour as the base price, and then for our more technical workers, it's even a little bit higher than that. Which, if you were to find the similar sort of people in America, for the customer service people, the administrative people, if I was to hire them in-house on Maui, I'd be paying at least $20 an hour. In addition to that, I'd be paying for their health insurance costs. I'd have additional fees that would be racking up from processing the payroll. I would be needing to pay the rent for their office, upkeep their computers, have the on-site IT. So when you factor all the different costs that are involved with not only just having an employee, but keeping an employee, the cost savings can be extremely huge. For the technical workers that we have, if I was to look for similar people, probably $65 an hour for the work that they're doing. So you compare that to about 15, which is typically what we charge for them, and the cost savings are huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And for a lot of e-commerce businesses, most of the audience is probably going to be operating in Amazon or some kind of e-commerce business. When you're starting out, the biggest expense is definitely inventory or advertising, probably inventory. But once you scale up past $1 million mark or closer to the 8-figure mark, your biggest expense starts to become HR, like actual employees, right? And what you just mentioned is a massive, huge chunk of money, $63 an hour compared to someone comparable here, closer to $10 or $15 an hour, right?
Yeah.
It sounds almost too good to be true. So, like, what are some of the challenges that come with having overseas employees that make this not just like for every company out there?
Well, there's some kind of treacherous grounds that you can find yourself in if you try and go too inexpensive, which, like I said before, we're kind of on the upper end of the cost that you're going to find. You can get really, really inexpensive people if you go to places like Upwork.com or something like that, where you're actually interfacing one-on-one with the assistants. However, there's many downsides that can happen with that. I've experimented with that a bit in the past, and you're going to run into issues where a lot of times people are going to be moonlighting. They're going to say that they're working full-time for you, but you're going to find out that they have maybe 3 or 4 other clients that they're trying to balance at the same time. So they'll be billing you out a very inexpensive hourly rate, but of each hour, maybe you're only getting 10 or 15 minutes. And because they're in an unmanaged situation, they're working from home, they're not in an office environment, you can't really find out if they're doing that or not until you start seeing their productivity. If you look it up at the end of the month and things just don't seem to be lining up, they probably aren't. The other thing, without the supervision to make sure that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing, there can definitely be some issues with infrastructure. with the connection speed of people that you're going to be working with, as well as the hardware that they're going to be working on. It's very common to have people have internet lines that are illegally tapped into to wherever they are, or just really, really slow connections to begin with. If they're out in the province, they might be working on what at its best would be like a 5 megabyte per second connection, and
and it's 3 for most of the country, right? Outside of the major cities like Cebu and Manila.
Yeah, it's very slow. Basically, what they did in kind of the more the like where we are in Cebu or up in Manila, they initially started out making these zones called PEZA zones, which stands for Philippine Economic Zoning Authority or something like that. And basically, what they did is they were trying to attract jobs to come in from large foreign corporations. And what they did is they piped in the fastest fiber that they could, put in new lines underneath the ocean, and the government helped to subsidize that. And then they set up basically preferential tax zones, which is what the PEZA zones are. You can get as low as 5% corporate income tax in some of these areas, which has brought on a lot of large foreign companies that have come in here. Amazon actually just opened up a office with about 500 people a few months ago. So it's big names are coming out here. You got Mercedes-Benz, Chase Bank, Facebook, a lot of corporations that people are very familiar with. So within these specific zones, within the PEZA zones or right near them, you're going to find very fast connections for the area, where you can find 100 to 200 megabyte per second lines. And then as you get away from that, it all drops off. And
so this is only within like specific areas of Cebu City and Manila, right? This is not blanket across the entire city. So
not
for
at all.
people, if you're looking for someone in Manila or Cebu City, just understand that this is not applying to everyone that lives in the city. There still is mostly pretty slow internet, except within these specific zones, right?
Yeah, and the internet is expensive for a like 100 megabyte line. It runs just under $200 a month, which is not affordable for most people unless they're sharing it on some level. So the connections that you're going to run into can be pretty difficult to work with, and people really need jobs. So sometimes you're going to have people that say that they're able to do stuff that they can't do, and without any sort of supervisory role that's happening with them. If they're a typical work at home remote worker, it's kind of pay your money, take your chances.
Yeah, I've certainly ran into a lot of the issues that you're mentioning here. Can you give us an idea of, you've obviously hired a lot of people here locally in Cebu in the Philippines. What is, how do you vet these people before you hire them? You must have a pretty good process, like a checklist to go through to weed out some of these issues, right?
Yeah. Typically we hire about 1 out of every 100 applicants that we get. I don't deal with people that don't already have prior experience in what I'm hiring for, multiple years of prior experience. Definitely call all the references, make sure that they're people that show up on time, that are good workers, try and get as much of a background as we can. And then typically before I'll ever set them up with a client, I'll have them work for me on some of our in-house projects to really make sure that they are able to make the grade and be able to be somebody that we're willing to put our reputation on the line for. Because if we provide people with subpar workers, that's not going to work for anybody. So typically we're able to find pretty good people with with enough effort. We really have to go through a huge interview process. We have, I'd say, probably half the applications that come in or more don't even make it to the point where we'll invite them in for an interview. And then normally there's 2 or 3 interviews that happen once they make that cut. And luckily we're able to there's lots of people that are looking for work out here, so we don't really have that much of a shortage in terms of finding people that are looking to apply. And then we have a very good reputation within the business process outsourcing industry here, because we pay people very well, and we treat people well. Some of these other places are really large, and a lot of the bosses won't know everybody's name. They'll actually, at the place where I had my team when I first got here, the boss would call people by their desk numbers, which I felt was impersonal and fairly
it's very
rude.
impersonal.
Yeah, and
Wow.
it didn't. The people weren't very happy there. That's for sure. So to treat people right and to pay them well, we're able to get people that really want to work for us. So we kind of get the pick of the litter. Like, for instance, I had somebody that they needed somebody that was good at QuickBooks. It was a financial controller for a company in Hawaii that was looking for somebody to help her out that needed to just do kind of basic invoicing, reconciliations, all that sort of stuff. And she's asking me, I remember when we first started, I need somebody that does QuickBooks. And do they have QuickBooks in the Philippines? Do they know what QuickBooks is? I said, yeah. Actually, the support number, if you call the support for QuickBooks online, it rings about a block and a half from my office. And we were able to pull somebody from that office because we pay significantly more than they do there. And when we had the introduction with that woman, it was kind of funny because she said, "Okay, have you heard about this thing called QuickBooks Online?" And the team member that I paired her with was like, "Yes, ma'am, I actually did support for QuickBooks Online. When people would get stuck, they'd give me a call, and yeah, I know QuickBooks Online very, very well." I could hear the lady's jaw hit the floor from about 6,000 miles away. She had no idea that she'd be able to get connected with somebody of that caliber. So it's pretty amazing what there is in terms of really rich human resources. And people here work extremely hard. Extremely hard.
Yeah, I mean, it's the biggest export in the Philippines is labor.
Mm-hmm.
It's why, like, there's big areas of Cebu City where we are right now that they have all these massive office buildings, and they're all just serving overseas companies, right? They're just full of employees doing business process outsourcing, call centers and stuff like that, mostly for American or Canadian, European companies, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There are some giant ones that are out here where you'll see more than 500 cubicles on one floor, and the scale of it's massive. Most people don't really realize how big of an industry it is until they actually get out here and are able to see for themselves.
And so you obviously have a lot of experience at this point, but what are some big mistakes that you made when you were building out your teams here in the Philippines? Because it is, similar to, but definitely different than hiring American or Canadian employees.
Yeah, there's quite a few different places where I think I've made mistakes and learned along the line. People want jobs, so they'll sometimes say that they're able to do stuff that they're not able to do. So, saying something is one thing, but I like people to actually be able to, provide examples, demonstrate that their skills are there.
And do you do that before you actually hire them? Do you send them like a test task as a contractor before you actually hire them full time?
Yeah, normally I start people off with a probationary period. I do some pretty rigorous testing during the interview process, and then
You're like actually like with them, you're gonna go on a computer and see their competence during the actual interview?
yeah, like for somebody I had this morning, I had an interview this morning with a woman that was pretty good. I think we'll probably take her on, where she told me all the different things that she could do, and then I actually set up a laptop for her and had her type me a story so that I could test her actual written skills, how fast she was typing. The position that she was applying for was fairly simple, so it didn't really require a huge amount of demonstration. She's applying for a very simple virtual assistant position for some tasks that weren't extremely difficult. But on some of the harder ones, like the programmers and the web developers and that sort of thing, we have a lot of internal projects that we're always kind of cycling through. So normally I like to start them on one of my things, really get a good feeling for if they're going to be able to do it or not. Try and start them off with much less instruction than they probably need, and see if they're able to sink or swim and kind of figure out, what areas they're having the most problems with, and go from there. Really, the hands-on training is extremely important. I actually keep a desk specifically in my office that I'll cycle the new people through. I can look up from my screen and be able to see their screens and really keep real solid tabs on what they're doing, and get a good idea for how they're performing by listening in, and keeping tabs visually on what they're doing. And that's really important for us to be able to keep our product high, our quality as good as it can be. To really
how important is communication? Because most people in the Philippines, in the bigger cities, they can speak fluent English, they can speak quite well, right? But it's never going to be as perfect as a real native English speaker, like a small percentage, right? And also, even for native English speakers, communication skills are not everyone's forte. Yeah. Like, I work with some people who they were born and raised in America, and they're just still not very good at communicating. So how much do you vet that during the interview process and the probationary period? How important is that?
Depending on the task, the communication skills are very, very important. With some of the technical skills, they can get away with a little bit less, but a lot of the things where you're going to be directly interacting with the clients in some sort of virtual assistant position or customer service representative position, it's extremely important. And that's one of the, if you were to break down, two things that are extremely important, it's the ability to learn and the ability to communicate. If we can identify that people are quick learners, then we can train them up on a variety of different tasks, and they don't necessarily need to come in the door knowing everything that they're going to need, because we can kind of help them build good habits and do some training. If the communication is an issue, or the ability to learn is an issue, then it's pretty much a no-go for us. Luckily for me, I got kind of dealt a good hand, I guess, because being born and raised in Hawaii, we have a different kind of English that people speak there called Pidgin, which is it's pretty broken English is what it sounds like. It came from in the about 200 years ago in Hawaii, sugarcane was the main industry, and they imported a bunch of different workers from the Philippines, from China, from Japan, and they all kind of lived together, and the language turned into like this combination of Tagalog, Ilocano, Chinese, all kinds of different things mixed with English. So people there kind of speak kind of a broken English to begin with, and in terms of being able to communicate with people here, I haven't really had that much of a problem.
I guess, yeah, it's the same in Maui pretty much, eh?
Yeah, it's, you're gonna have people that are speaking English as a second language, or are trying to speak English in a way that is fairly broken. And it's kind of funny, because with a lot of my Hawaii clients, they'll ask me, they'll be like, how are the English skills with your workers in the Philippines? And I'll say, well, actually better than people in Hawaii a lot of the time, because the people that are in the Philippines are actually trying to speak proper English, and the people that are in Hawaii are speaking broken English on purpose. So it ends up being a little bit better. And also for the Hawaiian words, the pronunciation of the different sounds is very similar to the local dialect here in Cebu, the Cebuano dialect. So they can actually speak the Hawaiian words with a lot more of an authentic sound than most people that moved over from the mainland United States.
That's really funny. And yeah, the local language here in Cebu, Bisaya, it uses a lot of English words and also just straight up Spanish words that are the same. So if you understand a little bit of Spanish and English, you're going to understand probably about 15% of what people are saying in Bisaya anyway. So it's kind of a funny thing about living here. I don't speak any Bisaya yet, but I can understand the gist of what people are saying most of the time just because of that.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, it definitely is. Just the whole language thing here in general is very interesting, because each region of the Philippines actually has its own language, and the history of the country, the reason why it became a country was basically because it was all conquered by the Spanish at one point. Before then, it was kind of many different zones that were kind of broken up without much unification between them. And I've actually noticed that when you see a local Filipino talk with somebody that's from a different region of the country, a lot of times the people here won't speak the dialect of the other region, so they'll end up resorting to English to communicate with each other. So English is actually the second language for a lot of the people here, out of necessity, just to be able to make it in this country. So it's interesting how all that works out.
It is pretty funny, yeah, like the two biggest cities, right? Like Cebu City and Manila actually speak different languages.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time that people will travel between the two biggest cities and not be able to communicate unless it's through English.
Yeah.
Which is quite an interesting thing about this. So this has been really, really valuable, I think, especially to people who they want to scale to the next level in their Amazon or e-commerce business, but they're doing everything themselves. It can be a little bit of a scary thing to hire people, and this has been some really good insight into how you can do that on a smaller scale instead of committing to $40,000, $50,000 a year for an American person. That's an equivalent. So what are some really good parting pieces of advice? Let's say that you are an e-commerce brand owner and you want to scale to the next level, but you really don't know what you're doing when it comes to hiring.
Well, there's basically two choices that you have. You can work with an agency, or you can try and go person to person. And both definitely have their upsides and their downsides. If you're looking at kind of where you're trying to go, if you think that you're only going to have one person, then and you're not going to need to eventually scale into a team, you can really get away with the person-to-person thing. You might need to try a couple times before you get the right one. But if you're patient enough through that process, sometimes you can save a little bit of money by going person to person. However, if you're looking to set up a team and you know that you're going to eventually need 2 or 3 or more, I would definitely recommend going with an agency, because what can happen is if you're kind of going the traditional route, you hire one person and then you get another person that's in a different area, you're going to have to train that second person, and then you're going to have to train the third person, and then if one of the people ducks out on you for one reason or another, they have a kid on the way, or they have a sick family member or something, and they're going to stop working for you, you're going to have to train their replacement. Where if you go with kind of the agency model, which is what we do at my company, you can start with one person, and if they're working out well, you want to scale to a second or a third person, you can just let the agency know, hey, I need to scale up, and they can actually put the second person physically right next to the first person, and you can have that first person train the second person for you. And then if you need a third or a fourth or a fifth, and then maybe you need to go back to a fourth, it makes it as easy as just making a phone call and saying, I need more. If they're kind of on a similar sort of task pattern, then it makes it really, really easy to scale up and scale down. So before you really get too committed with, your first assistant, take a good inventory of kind of where you think it's going to go. If you think that it's something that's going to be able to ramp up, I definitely recommend setting everybody up in kind of a more formal office environment where you're going to not have to worry about the bad infrastructure, the slow connection, the moonlighting, all that sort of stuff. And you'll be able to easily scale up and scale down. That was kind of one of the first things that I figured out when I came over here that really made my life much, much easier. Because prior to that, with the call center that I had been running on Maui, I was training everyone myself, and it was a seasonal sort of thing. So we were going up and down, and it felt like I was either always hiring, firing, or training, and I was kind of stuck in this hamster wheel. And it wasn't until I came out here, really kind of realized that I could have one person train the other person, and it actually works out a lot better too, because they're going to generally train the second person in their local dialect, so they're able to pick things up really, really quick and not have any things lost in translation at all. And it's a pretty good way to go if you're looking to really take things to the next level, and you're not just looking for like little project-based help here or there or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the service that you provide is, a lot of people, they're wary of like, oh, I could just go hire someone myself and save the extra percentage on top of that or whatever. But I mean, as someone who has hired people in the Philippines for about 3 years, I was that guy who went through the entire process myself. And I can tell you, I spent thousands of dollars on dumb stuff, like keeping someone around longer than they should have been around. I've been through some of the things you're mentioning where someone was you know, they're getting paid a full-time salary, but clearly only working less than half of that.
Yeah.
And every time we're on a Skype call, they seem like they're going to fall asleep because they're so sleep deprived. Maybe had just woken up for that Skype call. I don't know. But I've been through all that, and that stuff costs money too. The learning curve, the learning process. So I would just give a word of caution to people out there before you go judging services like that. They realize that it actually does have quite a bit of value. And if people want to reach out to you online, where can they do that?
Troublefreeemployees.com. That's the name of our website. You can find us there. We offer free 4-hour trials too. If you're interested in trying out services, kind of getting a good idea of how well, you know, Filipino workers will be able to do for you, we can set you up with a 4-hour free trial for either the technical virtual assistants or the administrative virtual assistants. So that's where you can find us.
Awesome, Jake. Well, it's a pleasure having you on here.
Thank you so much.
Tons and tons of value. And at the very least, guys, definitely take some of his advice. This is a guy who knows what he's talking about when it comes to hiring people out here in the Philippines, and all the pitfalls and stuff to avoid there. So at the very least, write some of the stuff down, make a little checklist before you go hiring your own first virtual assistant to help grow your Amazon business. So until next time, guys, see you later. You can find the show notes on kenjiroy.com/blog and can reach out to me through the comments there. Cheers.
For show notes and resources mentioned in this episode, visit kenjiroi.com.